Coach Herman Boone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I realize that this program today and for the rest of this year is a very serious program. And I appreciate your sense of humor, but I believe that sometimes a sense of humor is what every family needs to just get them through the day. Because our country, our economy is so depressed today and our world is so uncertain, sometimes our families just need a good laugh. Today is a perfect day. It's a perfect day, the most perfect day that I can think of, to have each and every one of you to turn to your neighbor or the nearest person next to you and extend your hand and say, welcome brother, welcome sister, welcome neighbor. May peace and love be a part of you for the rest of your lives. Thank you for extending your hand to your neighbor. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for honoring us with your presence here today as we gather at this great march to honor the memory and legacy of a man, a great man, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It is important, however, to note that we gather here today not to remember Dr. King's death, but rather to remember his life. History tells us that because of a little tired lady named Rosa Parks, who refused to give her seat to a white man, led not only to Dr. King's involvement in the civil rights movement, but that brave act by this little frail lady became the sole foundation of every civil rights law that exists in America today. Thank God for Rosa Parks. After Mrs. Parks' arrest, Dr. King's civil rights activity for all people began with a protest march in Montgomery against that segregated bus system. That year, Mrs. Parks was arrested for disobeying a city law requiring that blacks and all other minorities give up their seats on buses when a white person wanted a seat. And because of this arrest, black leaders in Montgomery, Alabama urged all blacks to boycott that segregated bus system. Black ministers asked Dr. King, who was just a young minister at Dexter Street Baptist Church, to become their leader. Afraid for his life and the safety of his family, reluctantly he accepted this role. And his very first speech as leader of this boycott, he said to his colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I may not live long, but remember from this day on, first and foremost, we are citizens of the United States of America. Thanks to the struggles of Dr. King and his dream, we can now say with pride that we live in the only country in the world where people from every country in the world have come to make their homes. And when Dr. King said that we are and you are somebody, that in itself brought diversity to the forefront of America conscious. Because he said that diversity is not about the color of one's skin, his religion, or national origin. Diversity is basically about you as an individual and a child of God. And through respect and appreciation of your fellow man, all mankind then and only then will have to take his rightful place in the senior management of his community. Dr. King finished his letter to the Alabama clergyman by saying, gentlemen, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states, yet I cannot and will not sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, because all of us are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality tied to a single garment of destiny. So whatever affects one directly affects all of us. Never again can we afford to live with the narrow outside agitator idea because anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within the borders of this United States, because this is our country too. The ministers of Birmingham continued to ask Dr. King, why direct action? Why sit-ins? Why marches? Isn't negotiation a better path to take? Dr. King answered by saying, gentlemen, you are quite right in calling for negotiations. Indeed, this is the very purpose of direct action. Nonviolent action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issues of the day. He said to them, too long has our beloved Southland been bogged down in a tragic effort to live in a monologue rather than dialogue. We have waited for 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. The nations of Africa and Asia have moved with jet-like speed towards gaining their political independence. Why then, gentlemen, do we creep with buggy-like speed towards gaining the right to a single cup of coffee at a restaurant in America? Why? Perhaps it's easy for those who've never felt the stinging dot of segregation to say, wait. But when you've seen vicious mobs lynch your mother and your father at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whims, when you've seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and kill your brother, when you've seen your first name become nigger or wetbacks and your middle name become boy and your wife and mother are never given the respect title of Mrs., then, gentlemen, you will now understand why I find it difficult to wait any longer. I think Dr. King would say, ladies and gentlemen of San Antonio, I fought for freedom, but for everybody's freedom, but not for the freedom of people to kill each other with reckless abandon. And I know that he would say, ladies and gentlemen, I did not live and die for the freedom of children to have children and the fathers of these children walk away from them and abandon them as though they never existed. And I know he would say to all of our city and country leaders that city mothers and fathers, I fought for all people to have the right to work, but not to have whole communities and people abandoned for political advancement. This, ladies and gentlemen of San Antonio, is what I lived and died for. But I must close. But before I do, I am compelled to let you know that I think he would say that thank you all of this day of gathering for continuing to honor the life and work of Dr. King. Yet to live his dream, we must act hard to give our children a future. We can get started by taking away their guns today and give them books. We must act now to take away their despair and give them hope. We must act to rebuild the families and neighborhoods and the communities of all of us, or all of us will perish away on the face of this earth. Last, we all, whether you are a parent, a neighbor, or friend, we all must demand that our children pull their pants up from way below their below so that they can take their rightful place in the senior management of their country. San Antonians, we cannot take a day off. We must do this because Dr. King's dreams and visions are the foundation of our future, the future of our children, because our children are the salt of the earth and the light of the world.